In the Winters family albums, there was a photograph that spoke more than 1,000 words. 2 5-year-old girls, one with golden curls and the other with brown hair, were holding their grandmother Daisy's hands in a garden full of daisies. The difference between them was in their eyes. Madeline, the one with golden curls, smiled with bright eyes at the camera. Lydia, with brown hair, looked not at the lens, but at her cousin's lace dress. Even back then, the signs were there, as subtle as the wind that swayed the curtains of Grandma Daisy's house on summer afternoons. "Madeline, dear, you're here!" The voice of Mrs. Days, then in her vigorous 60s, filled the wooden house in the countryside. The silver-haired woman with deep blue eyes embraced her granddaughter who had just arrived to spend the summer holidays. "Grandma, I brought some cherry chocolates for you," said Madeline, who was 8 years old, handing over a blue box with a golden ribbon. Lydia watched from the kitchen door, biting her lower lip. Her mother, Madeline's father's sister, couldn't afford elaborate gifts. She had brought only a handmade card. "Look, Lydia, let's share," offered Madeline, opening the box. "Grandma's favourites are the cherry ones, but I prefer the strawberry ones. You can have the caramel ones, which I know you love." That gesture of generosity was typical of Madeline. But instead of gratitude, something dark was growing in little Lydia's eyes. It wasn't just about the chocolates, it was about everything Madeline represented. The big house in the city, the new clothes every season, the imported toys, the vacations. "Girls," called Grandma Days, "how about helping me make a cake? That special recipe I only make when you're here." Daisy's kitchen was the refuge where differences seemed to disappear. There, with their hands in the dough, covered in flour and laughter, the cousins found common ground, a place where what mattered was the grandmother's love, distributed in equal and generous portions like the slices of cake they served afterward. "You are like the 2 halves of my heart," Days would say, kissing the tops of each granddaughter's head. Different, but equally precious. On summer nights, sitting on the porch, Days would tell stories of when she was young, of loves lost and found, of difficult choices and second chances. The girls listened, enchanted, not yet realizing how much those stories would echo in their own lives years later. Years passed. Madeline grew up slender and confident, studied journalism at university, and began building a promising career. Lydia, equally intelligent, chose business administration, but always worked in jobs she considered below her potential. It was during Grandma Daisy's 80th birthday party that Madeline met Nicholas. Tall, with green eyes and a smile that could light up any room, Nicholas was the grandson of an old friend of Daisy's. The encounter seemed predestined, both passionate about books, lovers of jazz, and with the same peculiar sense of humour. "He's perfect for you," Days whispered to Madeline as they watched Nicholas helping to serve punch to the older guests. Lydia observed from afar, the champagne glass clutched tightly between her fingers. That night, wearing a borrowed dress, she felt that familiar pang in her chest once more upon seeing her radiant cousin beside Nicholas. Madeline and Nicholas's relationship blossomed like the roses in Daisy's garden. For 2 years they built a connection of intimacy and respect, visiting her grandmother's house on weekends, planning trips, and dreaming about the future. Lydia, in turn, closely followed everything. She became friends with Nicholas, finding in him a sympathetic ear for her professional frustrations. "You have the potential for much more," he always used to say, encouraging her. Life went on until Madeline received a proposal that would change everything, to cover a series of special reports in different countries on another continent, a 6-month project that could catapult her career. "You need to go," Nicholas said, holding her hands when Madeline hesitated. "It's the opportunity you've always dreamed of." "I'll be back before you notice my absence," she promised, kissing him tenderly. At that airport, as Madeline departed, Nicholas had no idea that other hands would begin to weave a new plot in her absence. Lydia's first message seemed innocent. "Nicholas, could you help me with some boxes I need to move? I promise to reward you with that risotto you like." The dinners became frequent, the walks in the park, the Sunday movies, the conversations that stretched into the early hours. Video calls with Madeline became shorter, excuses more frequent. When Madeline returned, tanned and full of stories, she found a different Nicholas, distant, evasive. The news came like thunder on a clear day. "I need to be honest with you," he said, avoiding her eyes. "Something happened while you were away." The rest of the words dissolved into a buzz. Lydia, her cousin, her childhood friend, the girl with whom she shared candies, secrets, dreams. How could you? Madeline's voice was just a thread when she confronted her cousin days later. "We didn't plan this," Lydia replied, with an expression that Madeline couldn't decipher. There was guilt, yes, but also a triumphant sparkle in her brown eyes. "Love just happened." Love. The word sounded empty, worn out. Madeline knew how to recognize the difference between love and possession. The invitation arrived a year later in a pearly paper envelope with golden embossed letters. "Nicholas Adams and Lydia Winters are pleased to invite you to celebrate their wedding." Madeline felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. 1 year. Just 1 year since she had returned to find her world turned upside down, and now they would be getting married. "You don't have to go," said her mother, worried about her daughter's pale face. But there was another person whose opinion Madeline valued above all. On an autumn afternoon, she drove to her grandmother's country house, seeking the comfort of the one who always knew how to balance wisdom and affection. Days was in the garden, tending to her begonias when her granddaughter arrived. Her movements were slower now at 84 years old, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. "So you received it," said the lady, noticing the envelope in Madeline's hand. "Grandma, how can I face this, seeing them together after everything?" Days sighed, removing her gardening gloves. "I got the invitation too, and I've already informed Lydia that I won't be going." Madeline widened her eyes. "You won't go to your own granddaughter's wedding?" "There are principles that even family love cannot bend, dear. What Lydia did, it wasn't just hurting you. It was breaking trust, respect. Nicholas isn't innocent in this story either, but Lydia is family." Sitting on the old rocking chair on the porch, with cups of chamomile tea in their hands, grandmother and granddaughter talked until sunset. "Lydia has always been marked by comparison," Days reflected. "Since she was little, she heard comments about how you had better things, better opportunities. Some adults were careless, comparing you two without thinking about the damage they were causing." "But that doesn't justify—" "No, it doesn't justify," the grandmother agreed, "but it helps to understand. Envy is like a weed that, if not uprooted, ends up suffocating everything around it, including the very heart of the one who harbours it." That night, lying in the old room of her grandmother's house, Madeline reflected on everything they had discussed. Daisy's words about her cousin reminded her of small moments. Lydia trying on her dresses when she thought she wasn't being watched. The sparkle in her eyes when someone praised Madeline. The way she shrank back when she couldn't match her cousin's achievements. In the morning, as she went down for breakfast, Madeline found her grandmother leafing through an old photo album. "Look," Days said, pointing to a yellowed photo. "This was the Christmas when you got that talking doll. Remember how enchanted Lydia was? She slept hugging the empty box of that doll because she said that way she could dream it was hers." Something broke inside Madeline. It wasn't anger or resentment, but a deep and painful understanding. Behind Lydia's betrayal was a wounded girl who never learned to deal with her darkest feelings. "Grandma," Madeline finally said, "if Lydia has been fed with bad feelings for so long, maybe it's time to offer something different." The wedding day arrived, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. The small neighborhood church was decorated with white flowers and satin ribbons. The guests, in their best clothes, whispered about the bride, the groom, and inevitably about the betrayed ex-girlfriend. "Do you think she'll come?" "Impossible. After what happened. I heard Lydia invited her just to humiliate her. Imagine the embarrassment if she shows up." The whispers ceased abruptly when a figure entered through the church doors. There was Madeline, in an elegant teal dress, her hair styled in a simple updo, but she was not alone. Leaning on her arm, Mrs. Days walked slowly, wearing a lilac silk ensemble and a small hat with a veil. A murmur swept through the church. Everyone knew that the grandmother had refused to attend, a decision that had left Lydia devastated in recent weeks. Nicholas, standing at the altar, visibly paled. His eyes met Madeline's, and something like shame and admiration crossed his face. Madeline guided her grandmother to a spot in the front row, reserved for the family matriarch. Days squeezed her granddaughter's hand, a gesture that spoke more than words could express. The wedding march began to play. Lydia appeared at the entrance of the church, dazzling in her white lace dress. Her eyes swept over the guests until they stopped, surprised, on the figure of Days. The smile that spread across her face was genuine, not of triumph, but of pure joy at seeing her beloved grandmother present on her big day. The ceremony proceeded with the expected solemnity. Vows were exchanged, rings placed, a new union officially sealed. Throughout the time, Madeline remained serene, not from indifference but from a newly discovered peace that came from the act of choosing forgiveness over resentment. At the reception, while the guests danced and celebrated, Lydia approached Madeline, who was serving a glass of punch to her grandmother. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" the bride asked, her voice trembling. They moved to a quiet corner of the hall. For a few moments the two cousins just looked at each other, the weight of years and choices hanging between them. "Why did you come?" Lydia finally asked. "After everything." "I came for myself," Madeline replied simply. "Because holding on to resentment is too heavy a burden, and I came for Grandma, who deserved to be here, even if she disagreed with your choices." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "I never imagined you would bring her. When she said she wouldn't come, it was like something inside me broke. She loves you, Lydia. We both do. I'm so sorry," Lydia confessed, tears now flowing freely. "Not for Nicholas, but for how we acted behind your back, for not being honest, for how I took advantage of your absence. I'm sorry for all those years letting envy consume me, for not being strong enough to celebrate your victories, for allowing petty comparisons to poison our bond." Madeline felt her own tears welling up. "I also have my share of blame. I never truly realized how you felt. Maybe if we had talked openly—" "No," interrupted Lydia. "Don't blame yourself for my mistakes. Please accept my apologies. I don't expect us to be like before, but perhaps with time—" "Time is our ally," said Madeline, smiling softly. "And we have a very wise grandmother to guide us." The two looked at Days, who was watching the scene from afar, her eyes shining with tears of pride and hope. Later, when the party was ending and the guests began to say their goodbyes, Days called her two granddaughters to her side. "Come here, my dears," she said, opening her arms. The three of them embraced, a perfect circle of affection and redemption. "Always remember," whispered Days, "that life is too short to harbour feelings that diminish us. Envy is like a poison we take, hoping the other person dies, and forgiveness is the most powerful antidote there is." That night, under the summer stars, an old wound began to heal. The path would be long, but the first step, the hardest one, had already been taken. In Madeline's bag, carefully kept, was that old photograph of the two girls in the daisy garden. Now she looked at the image with new eyes, not as a record of a time of lost innocence, but as a reminder that sometimes it's necessary to go back to the beginning to find the path to healing. The seeds of forgiveness once planted would bloom at the right time, transforming the garden where weeds once grew into a field of renewed possibilities. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.